Hello everyone, and welcome to this lecture recital recorded for the 21st Century Guitar Conference. I'm very sad to not be giving this talk in person in Lisbon and meeting you all, but I'm very excited to talk to you about the music of one of the most original and extraordinary composers of either the 20th or 21st centuries, Horatiu Radulescu. My name is Sam Cave, and I'm a guitarist and composer based in London in the United Kingdom. Today, I'm going to focus on Radulescu's 1984 work, Subconscious Wave, his opus 58 for guitar and pre-recorded digital sound. This extraordinary piece features on my 2019 solo album, Refracted Resonance, for the US label Metier Records, alongside music by Tristan Murray, Christopher Fox, George Holloway, and myself. In this talk, I'm going to place the work in the context of Radulescu's output, show how it displays the key aesthetic concepts that drive his music, and share my insights into the technical and interpretive aspects of preparing this piece for performance and recording. Horatiu Radulescu was born in Bucharest, Romania, on the 7th of January 1942, and died in Paris, in France, on the 25th of September 2008. His move to Paris in 1969 was a crucial moment in his musical life, and is considered by many to mark the beginning of his mature output. The development of his revolutionary spectral technique of composition had begun shortly before the seminal relocation to Paris, and is first given full voice in his 1969 work, Credo, for 9 cellos. This daring work is, in part, inspired by Radulescu's fascination with Stockhausen's 1968 work, Stimmung, a piece that Radulescu admired because it mirrored his own fascination with the harmonic series of overtones. Whereas Stimmung explores only the first 9 partials of the overtone series of its fundamental, Radulescu's Credo uses 45 partials. Radulescu's approach to the spectral resources of the harmonic series of overtones is very personal and quite distinct from the classic French instrumental synthesis spectralism developed in the mid-1970s by Gérard Griset, Tristan Murray, and other composers. It is rooted, as demonstrated by Credo, in the high reaches of the harmonic series and, more importantly, in the creation of what Radulescu terms sound plasma, more of which later. Subconscious Wave was premiered in 1985 at the Castel Sant'Angelo in Rome, in Italy, by the guitarist Dora Filippone. The composer himself looked after the digital sound and amplification for the premiere performance. If we take the almost precisely 40-year period between the start of Radulescu's mature output in 1969 and his death in 2008, then Subconscious Wave sits almost exactly at the midpoint of his career. Composed around this time was the set Intimate Rituals 1 to 11, which was written between 1985 and 1987. Of these, numbers 2, 4, 10 and 11 feature similar formats to Subconscious Wave, in that they make use of a soloist, or soloists, and a backing, which is either pre-recorded or performed live. Das Andere, one of Radulescu's most performed solo works, which is for either viola or cello, was composed in 1984 as well, and the Fifth String Quartet, possibly Radulescu's most famous chamber work, was written between 1990 and 1995. It is also interesting to note that Subconscious Wave was composed during the composition of Radulescu's most daring string quartet, the Fourth, which was written between 1976 and 1987. This quartet also makes use of recorded sound to create a piece for 9 string quartets, or, in Radulescu's own words, a live quartet surrounded by a 128-string imaginary viola da gamba. So, Subconscious Wave is a mature piece by a composer at the height of his powers, and is both typical in terms of format and, as we shall see, composition technique. But it is also unique in that it is the only piece originally containing a guitar as a soloist against a backing. I think this is both surprising and a great shame, for reasons that should become apparent. Like most of Radulescu's scores, this one requires some deciphering, and it is a fairly representative example of his idiosyncratic and highly personal style of notation. Each line of the score represents a time period of 1 minute. String numbers are shown in the conventional way as numbers in circles, and the numbers of the partials that can be plucked on the strings that are in play at any moment in the piece are shown as numerals. Alongside this, there are special homemade symbols for the plucking techniques and the bowing techniques, both on one string and all strings near the bridge. The first step in getting these details onto the guitar is to deal with the scordatura. This guitar is in C, in the purest possible sense of that term, and here is why. Here we see the first 20 partials in the overtone series of a low C. Deviations from equal temperament are shown above each partial in cent, 1/100th of a semitone, rounded to the nearest cent. From low to high, the 6 strings of the guitar are retuned to match the cent deviations of partials 5, giving an E 13.69 cents flat, 13, producing G sharp 40.52 cents sharp, 9, giving a D 3.91 cents sharp, 3, producing G 1.95 cents sharp, 15, giving us a B 11.73 cents flat, and 11, giving us F sharp 48.68 cents flat. To achieve accurate tuning, I calculate the frequency of these pitches and then use a tone generator to produce sine tones as tuning notes, one sine tone for each string. For example, the 6th string. Along these strings, we pluck only partials, natural harmonics. And when we play 2 harmonics, their resonances interact with each other and form a beat pattern. The nature of this beating is explicitly calculable by use of the absolute difference between the 2 sounding frequencies, and this beating is one example of the fabric of Radulescu's sound plasma, a concept well summed up by clarinetist Roger Heaton in his 1983 article in the contemporary music journal Contact entitled Sound Plasma. Radulescu's works are built from sound situations created by different treatments of fundamentals, the spectra produced by those treatments, and the isolation of individual spectra. The music results naturally from the initial organisation of sound sources and formal structures, its interest lying in the interaction of the resulting harmonics, different tones, subtones, rhythmic beats, and so on. The texture thus produced is called the sound plasma. Or, in the composer's own words, in his 1969 to 1973 text, Sound Plasma, Music of the Future Sign. There are no longer steps, interval jumps, chords, etc., but discreetly gliding and trembling narrow frequency bands, vibrating, living sound plasma. Duration, by lack of clear appearance and disappearance, is infinitely long or short, and no more an element of comparison. Hence, rhythm exists no longer as combined values, but only a spectrum pulse of the micro and macro sound plasma, or as infrasonic trembling of the non-evident sound lava. There are three main ways of plucking the harmonics. Firstly, completely open, where the left hand finger leaves contact with the string immediately after the pluck. And secondly, where the left hand finger remains in contact for a short time after plucking the string. And the third one is a fully closed or muted position for the left hand, where the left hand remains in contact with the string all the time after the pluck until the sound has decayed. In each of these plucking techniques, Radulescu describes the amount of fundamental, in this case the open string, that should be incorporated into the sound. For example, let vibrate both high harmonics and the open string, i.e. immediately after the pits, open the string, or open no longer the string, i.e. fingering the high positions, the hand remains in contact and mutes the string. The first of these is the fully open technique, and the second the fully closed. These subtle graduations of touch in the left hand require a lot of practice and contribute much, both in success and failure of execution, to the texture of the music. There is a special separate harmonic node that Radulescu deploys very carefully throughout Subconscious Wave. He calls it the multiphonic, and its node is located a tritone above the open string, and it produces a beautiful ethereal resonance. This is a very interesting pitch, as its node is located between the third and fourth partials of each string. And because of this, one can occasionally hear a triphonic or a complex aggregate of the open string and other overtones. For this reason, I have tended to render the explorations of this pitch in sparse areas of my interpretation, to really allow time to appreciate its complex beauty. Alongside this, there are two main ways of bowing the strings. The first is a flautando bow on just one string, the sixth string. Which brings out ghosts of partials inside the open string sound, a little like Tuvan overtone singing, and brings out individual partials. The second is a bowing on all six strings near the bridge to create flashes of light. What we can see here is an ultra-determinist approach to pitch and articulatory resources, but, as seen in the score and in Radulescu's writings about rhythm and duration, a very free approach to the moment-to-moment continuity of the music. It is the bands of pitch and frequency fields that are defined as they evolve over the time frame of the music, the trembling bands of sound plasma. This is very typical of Radulescu's approach to rhythm and macro and micro continuity and form. Finding the partials on each string was a critical step in learning the work, and I devised many exercises to work on this in my practice sessions, including arpeggios in natural harmonics, and scales when above the seventh partial. I also made use of the fact that the harmonic series has the same structure on every string, meaning that partials are adjacent to each other. For example, the fifth partial of the sixth string is located here, and the fifth partial of the fifth string is directly adjacent to it. I think that my obsession with the harmonic series, spectral resources in general, and my work as a composer utilising those resources gave me a bit of a leg up at this stage of the learning process, as I was used to referring to harmonics by their partial number and their cent deviations from equal temperament, which is exactly what Radulescu does in the score of Subconscious Wave. I initially found the bowing techniques very hard, both on one string, this flautando, and the bowing on all strings. And this is because of the very flat radius of the strings, and also the fact that the body keeps getting in the way of isolating individual strings. To solve this, I hit on an idea. The nodes of the harmonic series are symmetrical around the second partial, which is the octave above the fundamental. And so I decided to sit like this, because what is here is also here for the harmonics and vice versa. And so it follows that for the bowing, the nut can now act as the bridge. For the flautando and on all strings. We can really hear those flashes of light coming through. For the bowing, this offers me much greater control and access to the strings without the body getting in the way. And for the harmonics, plucking them at this end of the string simulates a higher action, and it also allows for greater control of the amount of open string in the sound. As a result, I think of having the shorter portion of the string between the plucking point and the node. Overall, these changes allow me to produce more resonance, a more satisfying attack, and allow me to produce better sound plasma. In listening to many performances of Radulescu's music for various forces, and spending lots of time with his scores, what becomes apparent is a sense of scale, a feeling of the eternal or perhaps the prehistoric, almost as though we're hearing the sound of the universe turning over. I needed to capture that feeling in my performances of Subconscious Wave and try to find a dramatic shape worthy of eternity. In the score, Radulescu occasionally includes markings like faster or morendo, but nothing more detailed, and it's up to us as performers to respond to the sound plasma. In order to capture the inherent energy and power in Radulescu's music, I've formulated some guiding principles to be applied in real time whilst practicing and performing the piece. Firstly, the evolving thickness and density of the plasma, as defined in this piece by the number of strings in play, the partials permitted upon them, and its rate of change. Secondly, the plucking methods that are in play at any moment and their respective potential energy. For example, the open plucking technique creates a longer resonance, and if you get it exactly right, also contains the fundamental, and so lends itself to a more sparse texture, whereas the very closed technique has a very short resonating period and lends itself to periods of high activity. The third of my guiding principles is the proximity or ongoing nature of the bowing techniques, either the relaxed overtone singing sound of the flautando or the flashes and shards of light created by bowing on all strings near the bridge. Here are some examples of these factors at play in real time. Firstly, the building of a wave of plasma as the number of strings and partials gradually increases. Secondly, a jump cut from an area of high intensity using the third closed plucking method to a sparse landscape built on Radulescu's multiphonic node. And finally, an ethereal plateau using almost all strings and all plucking methods, but focusing on the very highest partials. Playing Radulescu's music is a very different kind of experience. One has to be hyper-aware of the energy level of single sounds, the interior of those sounds, and try to wholeheartedly inhabit the sonic landscape created by the interaction of the sound sources. As composer Ben Lunn eloquently states in his article for the Lithuanian journal Principles of Music Composing, the ideal is a form of music which transcends harmony and counterpoint entirely. This occurs because the music becomes almost like a physical object, where sound, harmony, colour, texture and structure all combine together into one. I can only echo those sentiments, and playing this music really is like being in touch with a physical object or a living creature of sound. As a performer, one must ride the wild ocean, to misuse the title of Bob Gilmore's extensive 2003 interview with Radulescu for Contemporary Music Review. Another interpretive clue also came from Bob Gilmore, an insight he provided into the nature of the digital sound that forms the backing for Subconscious Wave. Before his death, Radulescu entrusted the contents of a computer hard drive to Bob Gilmore. This situation repeated itself when Bob gave the same archive to Christian Mason before his own passing. Christian is a composer and one of the artistic directors of the Octandre Ensemble, of which I am a member, and it was him that first invited me to learn and perform Subconscious Wave many years ago. Whilst looking through the performance materials, we discovered several versions of the digital sound part, two of which gave vital clues to its origins and evolution. And here's the second file. And finally, here's the completed backing for Subconscious Wave. From this, we can see that the digital sound backing is built from bells and bell sounds that seem to have been processed to retain their high partials. This discovery encouraged me to ensure that I was creating a bell-like resonance for every pitch in the plasma, and it prompted me to revise my choice of pick to a much thicker one. It was confirmation, if any were needed, of the elemental nature of Radulescu's music, and reinforced my view that terms like loud and especially quiet have a different meaning in the context of this music, and that what really matters is the elemental energy level of the plasma. For my live performances and CD recording of this work, I wanted the backing to take an active part in the performance and the creation of the sound plasma. And so John Croft, composer and a recording engineer, and I agreed that John would manipulate the volume of the backing in real time along with my performance to integrate it into the sound plasma. At the beginning of this talk, I showed how each of the guitar's strings is redefined as a partial of C, and that we pluck only natural harmonics along those retuned strings. When we play partials on those strings, we are treating them as fundamentals in their own right and using them to define new spectra. This dual functionality, where pitches, in this case open strings, are both partials and fundamentals defining their own spectra, is a key concept in Radulescu's harmonic language. He calls it the emanation of immanence. Let's look in more detail at how it works. String 6 is tuned to the cent deviations of the fifth partial of C, which, as we saw earlier, is an E 14 cents flat. Playing the fifth partial of that string produces a G sharp 2 octaves and a major third above the open string, but the fifth partial is always 14 cents flat, so the pitch produced is G sharp 28 cents flat. As you can see, this technique proliferates on all strings and for all partials used. We are constantly defining and interlocking new spectra by treating partials as fundamentals, and this is another key component of sound plasma. It is important to note that Radulescu's concept of the emanation of immanence also owes a debt to Stockhausen's Stimmung, where the basic partials are combined with varying vowel shapes to bring out their own overtones. As I mentioned earlier, though, Radulescu takes this notion and makes it an explicit and indispensable part of his vision for sound plasma, and explores its furthest reaches, as evidenced by the 45 partials explored in Credo, and the almost incomprehensibly rich harmonic design of the fourth string quartet. We have now seen how the spectrum of C defines the tuning of the instrument, and how those partials define new spectra during the piece. But where is the C fundamental? In the case of Subconscious Wave, the answer is in the voice of the performer, as it must be sung on an oo sound. For recording, this is very straightforward, as the voice can be recorded separately. In concert, though, it can be very hard to find, as no other pitches are equally tempered. However, there is a guide on the second string, from which one can go up a minor second to approximate the correct pitch. A guide tone of a B. A more high-tech solution is to wear an earphone that gives a sine tone of the exact pitch when required. Because of the range of the voice compared to the guitar, one can't sing a C low enough to registrally act as the fundamental of any of the open strings. And Radulescu defines the register of the sung C to be closer to the plucked harmonics and form part of the sound plasma as well. There are two other pieces in Radulescu's output that feature the guitar. There is a version for flute and guitar of the 1968 piano piece Cradle to Abysses, and Colonne d'Alba from 1988, which is for voice, flute, piano, viola, guitar and percussion. I said earlier that I felt it was surprising that there aren't any more works featuring guitar, and I say that because of Radulescu's concept of the sound icon, which is used as a backing in many of his pieces. A sound icon is, in Radulescu's own words, a grand piano lying on its side with the strings played by bowing. The instrument is presented in a new light. It is now a religious icon, a Byzantine icon. Radulescu goes on to specify that the strings of the piano are bowed with individual threads, and that the tuning of the icon is specific to each score and its spectral components. Sound icons make a fabulous sound. They have such resonance and magic, but it is definitely also true to say that they are not the most practical instrument in terms of setup or transportation, and many venues are extremely reticent about letting anything unorthodox happen to their pianos. I think that, even if he didn't want the guitar to feature as a soloist or an ensemble member, it's a great shame that Radulescu didn't make use of the guitar as a sound icon in miniature. The sympathetic resonances of the guitar and its ease of tuning would have made it the perfect candidate to become, as Segovia might have said it, a sound icon seen through the reverse side of a pair of binoculars. Many thanks indeed to the 21st Century Guitar Conference for having me to give this lecture recital, and a huge thank you to everyone for watching. I'm really looking forward to your questions. If you would like to find out more about Radulescu and his incredible musical language, then please take a look at this bibliography and discography. Thank you very much.